organization, and your employer decides not to employ a white male, you as a black person can actually bring a claim for discrimination because you've been treated because the reason for that treatment was on the grounds of race. It doesn't have to be your race. Okay. So you can still bring action. There are case law whereby an employer tells the secretary or tells HR manager not to employ black people in their organization. The HR manager was white. She was still able to bring action for discrimination, not because of her race, but because of the race of the person she's been told not to engage. But for us, what we'll be looking at in terms of COVID, we'll be looking at more long-term in terms of disability. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay. Then we'll talk about harassment. Is a right of protection against harassment. Harassment occurs when there are more than two incidents of whether it's verbal assault, bullying, or physical assault by an employer or by a customer of the employer. So you work in a pub and customers have the habit of slapping your bum when you're passing by. That is harassment. You can bring the harassment claim against the employer. Although it wasn't the employer that did that, you can bring an harassment claim against the employer. One thing that I should talk about here is also victimization. Victimization occurs when an employer treats an employee less favorably because they've asserted their statutory rights. And that's why we were talking about contractual rights and statutory rights. So if an employee asserts a statutory right and says, makes a complaint of discrimination, makes a complaint that they've been paid less than the minimum wage, raised a grievance, or supported an employee through a grievance process, if the employer treats them less favorably because of that, is victimization. Note that there's a difference between what the ordinary person calls victimization and what the law recognizes as victimization. So an employee says, I was victimized by not giving a promotion. I asked for leave, they didn't give me a leave, is victimization. It could be victimization in the ordinary sense of the word, but it's not victimization in the eyes of the law. Victimization in the eyes of the law is that they treat you less favorably because you've asserted a statutory right. So you complained about health and safety in the workplace, and you're treated less favorably because of that. You work in the health environment and you made a complaint to CQC, and you're treated less favorably because of that, or you're not promoted because of that. That is victimization, according to the law. We'll also talk about the obligation to provide a safe working environment. There is an obligation on an employer to provide a safe working environment, and that's under the health and safety regulation. And that also works with victimization. So if an employee makes a complaint that the workplace is not safe and reports a matter to the health and safety executive, and they treat it less favorably because of that, that will be victimization. And in terms of COVID, the issue now becomes whether COVID in the workplace or whether the environment in the workplace is COVID compliant, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll also talk about the parental leave. Many of us here are parents. So every parent of a child under the age of 16 or a child that is disabled under the age of 25 has the right to 4 weeks parental leave. It's unpaid, unfortunately. If the child is disabled, the parents can take that leave anyhow they like. So you can take in a day, 2 days, 3 days, but the maximum is 4 weeks. If the child is not disabled, you have to take it in weeks. So you can take 1 week, the maximum you can take is 2 weeks. And that is per child. So if you have 6 children under the age of 16, you have 6 times 1 month. You have 6 months of parental leave. Unfortunately, it's unpaid. There's also the right to care for dependents. So if you have a dependent, whether it's a child, an adult, or your grandma, your grandpa, you have the right to take few days off for emergencies and need to be careful. You need to make sure that it's an emergency. It is not to take care of a dependent for issues that can be foreseen. So you cannot take this because you want to take your child to, your child has an appointment with the doctors. You cannot take right to care for dependents. But if you get a call from school that your child fell off the tree or broke an arm, that you can take time off and you can take what is called reasonable. The law does not stipulate how many days you can take. It only says it's got to be reasonable time off. The last we talk about is statutory sick pay. Everyone is entitled to statutory sick pay provided you work with an employer for a month and provided you have made enough in terms of national insurance contribution. For most of us, provided you definitely be getting more than the minimum wage, so you would have paid enough into your national insurance contribution, which means that you'll be entitled to statutory sick pay. We all know the rules about statutory sick pay. The first 4 days is unpaid. But if the sickness lasts longer than 4 days, then you're entitled to SSP.
All right.
And SSP is for 2 weeks. After that, you can then claim disability allowance or whatever is being paid in terms of benefit at that point in time. Any questions so far?
Please feel free to come forward with your questions. Because the next part, we had put some time aside after this introduction for questions that came up that were relevant. But after this, he'll be speaking specifically on the topic of COVID-19 and the effect that it has on our employment rights. So if you have things that are a bit more general, this will be a good time to get them out. I've written a couple down myself, but I'm opening up the floor.
Yeah, and also, you need to understand this for the next part of the presentation to make sense to you.
Mm.
If you're lost here, the second part will be slightly more difficult.
So yeah, any takers for questions, feel free to unmute yourself and go for it. We've got enough time. Okay, if people are being shy, I've just got a quick one to ask.
Okay.
In terms of employment rights, in your professional opinion, is it worth joining your union, whatever your profession is? Is it worth just joining the union to have that as backup, or is it better to have some sort of personal insurance cover that gives you access to a lawyer?
Being a member for a trade union myself and a national negotiator for a trade union for many years, I'll say join the trade union.
Right, fantastic.
It's cheaper. It's cheaper.
Right. I hope everyone got that. So join your trade union if you've got one.
Yeah. The first thing I ask people when they come to see me about employment rights and employment issues, I say, are you a member of a trade union? Because I know that in terms of litigating employment matters, it can be quite expensive.
Right.
So I'll always say to you, join the trade union. Also, people, because if you're not a member of a trade union and you have issues bordering on employment, you may want to look at your building insurance. In many cases, people have what they call legal expenses cover in their building insurance. Many people don't know that.
Right.
Wow.
So have a look at any insurance you have, life policy. In some cases, you can get it with PPI.
Okay.
But have a look at it. For some people, they decide not to opt for it. And I think that's a very, very not a wise decision, because it will only add about £1 to your insurance for you to have legal expenses covered. So think about it.
Yeah.
The preferred option is go for the trade union.
Okay, trade union. As well as you may already have legal expenses cover as part of your insurance. And if you don't, it's worthwhile asking how much it will cost.
Yeah.
Because it might be a little bit of money that provides a lot of cover.
Yeah.
Okay. And my second question was a quick one relating to the parental leave. Is the 4 weeks per child per year, or do you just have that for the whole time?
Per child per year. Yes.
Right.
Thank you. You can carry it over.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. You can carry it over to another employer, not the same year. So you cannot say, I've not used my 4 weeks this year. It's if you've not used it, you've lost it. But you can carry. So if you work for an employer from January to June, and you've not used any of your parental leave,
okay,
you can carry 4 weeks to another employer.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So this is in addition to your regular sort of paid leave. And so you can
paid leave, yes.
Yeah, so you could potentially have almost about 8 weeks off work, but 4 weeks of that is unpaid, which your employer cannot say no to that. If you say you're taking parental leave, or do you still need to
you still need to agree with your employer. What the law says is that you must give your employer double the amount of days notice as you want for your holidays.
Okay.
For your leave. So if you need a week leave, you need to give employer 2 weeks notice. So if you want to take 2 weeks, you need to give your employer 4 weeks notice. And there are very, very few grounds upon which your employer can refuse your parental leave request. Very, very few.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the clarification. I think Bumi had something she wanted to ask before. Sorry.
No, it has been covered. Thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. If there are no more questions, I think we'll open up the floor for you to proceed to the next part, which is our COVID specific part. Just keeping an eye on the time. We're at 4:45, so you've easily got about I think you've got about 20 minutes to really get into this. 20 minutes or so.
Okay,
to really get into it. So you can have up to you get.
Go on. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go on.
Right. So is this where we are?
Yeah. So we need to move to the next slide.
No problem.
Then you've gone too far.
Yeah.
Don't go too far.
Right. Sorry. Is this where we are?
That's it. Yeah, fantastic. That's where we are. Okay. In terms of the effect of COVID on contractual terms, as I said, one is the unilateral variation of contract. If your contract does not have what they call a mobility clause, a mobility clause is a clause that allows the employer to insist that you work from anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It is not unusual for an employer to say your workplace will be 35 Genester Row, but they reserve the right to ask you to work from anywhere else. If your employer does not have that term in your contract, your employer cannot insist you to work from home. The same token, if there's no mobility clause in your contract, you cannot insist to work from home. Your employer can insist you work from the office. Second is in terms of the furlough scheme, whereby the government is paying 80%, and right now they'll be paying 62 something percent. In effect, that is a reduction in wages. And as I said, the employer does not have the right to reduce your wages without your consent. So the furlough scheme is technically a breach of your contract.
Right.
Also, in some cases, further down the line, when we're beginning to return to work, with employers making a lot of redundancy, what we'll find is that some of the jobs of those who have been made redundant will be added to the jobs of those who are still within work. So that's a change to your job description. And as such, without your agreement, your employer cannot change your job description. So those are the kind of debates that we're going to be having in the months and weeks to come. The second we'll talk about is the strict application of attendance-driven benefit. Okay, some of you are in so much high-powered jobs that you get bonuses, but a lot of bonuses are driven also by attendance. So they may say that you get this bonus provided your attendance is 100%, 90%, 50%. The question is that when you are self-isolated, is that discounted from your attendance? And because these are contractual terms, they're not affected by whatever the government puts out. So the employer says that before you can get this bonus, you must have 100% attendance. Self-isolation will be to your detriment. So you may lose benefits as a result of that. And some cases are beginning to come to court now about the effect of self-isolation and attendance-driven bonuses. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, you've gone again. Okay. I hope that you can see the image to the right of your screen. Mine is slightly obscured. Can we see it? Can we all see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, can you? Okay, this is the how self-isolation and COVID-19 works. So we need to understand this chart and see how it affects people. This is a typical family, 2.1 children. So mom, dad, 2 children. Let's say mom is diagnosed with COVID-19 on the 1st of the month. The law says that she needs to isolate for 10 days if you're diagnosed with COVID-19. Let's say now that on day 3, that's the 3rd of the month, child 1, Sam, also comes down with COVID-19. Sorry, before we go there, once mom has been diagnosed with COVID-19, she's supposed to isolate for 10 days. But everyone else in the family has to isolate for 14 days. Or that we know. Why the person that's got COVID is self-isolated for less than anybody else, I don't know. But that is what the law says. So let's say on the 3rd day of mom's self-isolation. Child 1 contracts COVID. She now has to isolate for 10 days. If you look at that, you can see that the days of isolation for her has been reduced by a day. If she didn't have COVID, she would be isolated for 14 days. But now that she has COVID, she's only isolated for 10 days. Child 2 does not have COVID at all, but he's isolating for 14 days. Dad did not contract COVID until day 12. So another 10 days has been added to Dad. However, the irony of it all is that child 2 that never had COVID is going to start another 14 days isolation from day 14. So child 2 is going to be isolating until the 28th of the month, by which time Dad has gone back to work, because that is just 14 and 10, while child 2 is 14 plus 14. Child 1 now has to start another 14 days isolation from day 12.
Oh my.
And mom will bear the brunt of all this, because mom's supposed to go back on day 14, day 10, but because child 1 has contracted COVID, you add 14 days to mom, that takes mom to 24th. But within that day, Dad has contracted COVID, so there's another 14 days to mom. So mom is really in self-isolating for almost 2 months. So once you get that picture down, we'll look at how it works in terms of. So we now know what the statutory and what the self-isolation isolation period is. The first thing we'll look at is right to time off for dependents. Does mom or dad have right to time off for dependents in any of these scenarios? Does anybody want to hazard a guess?
No.
I'm guessing yes, because if mom can't look after the children, then obviously they need someone to look after them.
That is not what time off for dependents is all about. It's not because I don't have childcare. No. Any other guesses?
I guess if you're a carer, specifically if you have to be a carer for like a lifelong illness or maybe some sort of severe illness, that means the child has to be cared for at home. Can't think of.
Okay, remember what I said, that time off for dependents is an emergency.
Right.
In this case, there's absolutely no emergency. Because by the time child 1 contracted COVID, mom is still self-isolating. So it's no longer an emergency. Child 2 didn't have COVID at all, so there's no emergency at all. Dad contracted COVID on day 12, but dad is not dependent. So in all these cases, neither mom nor dad can have time off for dependent because they don't have an emergency. However, they can take parental leave if they want to. So mom can take parental leave, dad can take parental leave. Unfortunately, because of the time period that you can only take it in weeks, by the time mom applies for parental leave for a week, when she's supposed to give 2 weeks notice, the self-isolation period is already over. So in many of these cases, I don't think that the government has thought through some of these issues that parents will need to have to deal with. Okay, we'll quickly look at statutory sick pay and occupational sick pay. In terms of mom, if mom has an occupational sick pay term in her contract, then she'll be paid occupational sick pay for the period that she's off sick. So from the 1st to the 10th, she'll be paid occupational sick pay. But she wants to stay, because she's now self-isolating from day 10, she'll be entitled to statutory sick pay, because that's what the government says. That if you're self-isolating to stop the contamination, and you've been advised by the giving medical advice to self-isolate, then you'll be entitled to statutory sick pay. So she's entitled to statutory sick pay for 14 days. The government says they'll do 2 weeks. So 14 days she'll be entitled to statutory sick pay. After that, she gets nothing, despite the fact that she's at home for almost 2 months. Dad, too, will get statutory. If dad has occupational sick pay, dad will not get from day 1 to day 12, because dad is not sick. Dad has just been told to self-isolate, and occupational sick pay does not deal with self-isolation. It only deals with sickness. You have to be sick to get occupational sick pay. So from day 1 to day 12, dad will have to rely on SSP, statutory sick pay. Then occupational sick pay will kick in for dad from day 13. Do we understand how that works?
Yes, we do.
Okay. The question is holiday pay, paid holidays. The law also missed that point about dealing with holiday pay. Paid holidays. We're all entitled to 20 days paid holiday and bank holidays, which is 28 days minimum. Because the law did not take into cognizance that people may be entitled to paid holidays, the effect of that is that your employer could insist that you use your paid holiday for self-isolation. And that's perfectly legal.
Wow.
So, mom could have 10 days of a paid holiday used up during self-isolation. The employer can insist that she use that. So by the time mom comes out, almost all her holiday is gone. It is quite possible that the law would not like that the law would say if you're sick, then because the law says if you're sick, you cannot use your holidays. But if dad is not protected because dad wasn't sick. So the employer could insist that whilst dad is self-isolating, dad to use his paid holidays. So those are some of the intrigues that we'll be dealing with sooner or later. Next slide, please. Okay. Then we look at HR issues. Attendance. Will the fact that you're self-isolating mean that the employer would not consider your attendance as an issue? The answer is no. The employer is still entitled to consider your attendance as an issue, even if you're self-isolating. Even if you contracted the virus within the workspace, and some medical professionals are now beginning to deal with that. The fact that you contracted it within the workplace doesn't mean the employer is not entitled to consider attendance as an issue. And if you look at mom, the slide we're looking at, that mom is now spent almost 2 months self-isolating because husband and child contracted COVID. The employer is still entitled to look at that as an issue. What about performance? if your attendance invariably will affect your performance because you'll probably not be meeting your target. And the fact that is due to self-isolating becomes immaterial. The employer is still entitled to consider whether you're high performing or not high performing. Also, in terms of conduct, if an employer says to you they want you to work, you would rather work from home because in some cases, some people are afraid to step out of the house.
Yeah.
So, but employer, and you say to your employer, I'd rather work from home. And your employer says, no, I want you to work from the office. If you do not have COVID, and if you're not self-isolated, if you've not been advised to self-isolate, then it becomes a conduct issue. Your employer may consider that to be misconduct if they ask you to come to work and you refuse. I know people have said, I don't want to go to work because I don't want to get in the public transport system. Unfortunately, that is no defense to an issue of conduct. Okay. The other is some other substantial reason, which is another reason. These four items we've listed here, they are potential fair reason for dismissal. So an employer can dismiss you for attendance, they can dismiss for performance, they can dismiss for conduct, they can dismiss for some other substantial reason. And you refusing to come to work when you're not been told to self-isolate could be a conduct issue, could also be some other substantial reason. And these are the issues that we will have to grapple with moving forward. Can we move forward? Next slide, please. Okay. So what does the future hold for us? Hopefully, vaccine will be developed sometime in the future. We know what the Prime Minister has been talking about. The Prime Minister is talking about what they call the Freedom Pass. So right now, he's saying that if there was a device by which people can test themselves every day, there may come a situation whereby then they'll be able to go out and mingle. The converse is that if that kit is in your house, which is saying that they may be able to supply every household, if you prove negative, then you cannot go out. What it termed that is freedom pass. If you then freedom pass, if that device is available and you decide not to get the device, your employer may be entitled to say to you, don't come to work until you show me a pass. And if you refuse, that could be a conduct issue. Because the employer will argue that I'm obliged to provide a safe working environment and you've not given me a positive result. So that's one of the things the government is looking at, that if we're going to have to live with this long term, then there may be a need to supply kits to people that every day you test yourself. And once you've got the pass, then you can move out. It will also mean that the bus conductor, whilst looking at a bus pass, will also be checking if you've got a freedom pass. That is what that's what the government is talking about. Whether that will fly, we don't know. But that is what they're actively working on. Now, if we are going to if we're going to live with COVID, then it has to be a way to get the economy working. And one way of getting the economy working is to have people come out with a freedom pass. The second is what is now being termed long COVID. Medical evidence begins to show that even those who have recovered from COVID now have long-term sickness.
Wow.
One is one is weakness, fatigue. They're also talking about respiratory issues. They're also talking about memory losses. So if you have such a thing, the question is, would that qualify as a disability or not? We know that for a long time, the government denied that, refused to accept that ME was a disability. The question is, will the government now decide that this long COVID is a disability or not? Will long COVID affect your performance? Would you be able to say to your employer, my performance is poor because I've got long COVID? But these are the issues that we now have to deal with in the future. That COVID, whilst you may go through it, there will be legacy that it will leave within us that will affect us, either mentally or physically. And those are the issues that employers and ourselves will need to deal with. So I hope I was still within time.
Absolutely. You've done a smashing job, honestly. Well done. I know it was challenging to try and get all that content in there, but you being so concise means that we actually have time for people to dig deeper and think of any scenarios that they do have. We have easily about 5-10 minutes where we're open to questions. So I'll go quiet now so people can actually come forward, or you can send it to us in the chat if you don't want us to hear your voice right now. We're more than happy to read messages from the chat. So yeah, any questions? I've got some myself already, but I'll give someone else a chance.
Right, can I just ask, can I get a copy of this slide, please?
Absolutely, we will be sharing the slides. I'm hoping everyone's going to join our African and Caribbean people of Wigan Facebook group, because we're going to be sharing all of our details easily on there while we get to the point.
Okay then.
Right.
I don't know if Seyi, if that's okay with you for us to share the slides.
And that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Right. All right. I just want to add to what you asked before. I might be wrong, but that's what I heard. You said, why would somebody that has already contracted the COVID virus have to self-isolate for 10 days? Why family members have to be 14 days? I think the reason might be, I'm not too sure, but I heard that for you to test positive to show positivity or symptoms, at least 4 or 5 days have already gone. So if 4 or 5 days,
it's possible, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
if 4 or 5 days have already been counted, so for you to show symptoms and be positive to it, so you've got 10 more days. That's why it's 10 days, not extra 14 days. Might be, I had that, yeah. I don't know if that is true, but maybe that's the reason why being positive, you have to self-isolate lesser than family members have to be 14. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. That's a possibility that you will probably not test positive day one.
Yeah.
You probably don't know about it day one. It's possible.
Right. All right.
But you may know about it day 2. So you're now talking 12 days rather than 14 days.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. All right.
Are there any other questions at all? It seems it's been a long week for everyone. Everyone's so quiet today. It was the same thing at church. All the children were so quiet.
They're shocked by the tsunami that's coming.
I know.
I
The
think
reality
that's
of being
part it.
stuck
The
at
reality
home.
of it, yeah.
And all the new announcements about the new lockdown we seem inevitable to get. So I imagine there's a lot going through people's minds. Right, okay, while people are summing up the bravery, or maybe you've just been so good with your talk that they can't possibly think of any questions to ask you, but I can. I have a scenario. A friend of mine works for a small accountancy firm, and with the sort of like reinstatement of sort of like lockdown measures here up north, they've told them they have to go home. They don't have the facility to work from home because it's a small firm that can't quite afford that yet. And so my friend was told they had to go home for, I think it's a fortnight right now. And one of their staff members contracted it, actually. That's why they've been all sent home to stay for 2 weeks. However, they've been told to take it as paid leave. And I wanted to know if there was any legal grounds for challenging that, or if that simply was what it was. They said they had the choice of taking it as paid or unpaid leave, but that was since there was going to be no furlough pay or any sort of other support.
Okay. I'm sure you're not surprised that it's going to be the norm moving forward.
Wow. Okay.
In terms of, let's talk about SSP, sick pay, because they're not poorly themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they've not been advised by a medical professional to self-isolate, they do not qualify for SSP.
Right.
And as I said, this is one of the areas where the government didn't look closely at. So the employer is within its right to say, go home, use your paid holiday.
Okay.
Unfair, but
Legally sound.
legally sound.
Now,
Because
this
as also
particular
said
friend.
before, sorry, I also said before that the employer, in terms of mutuality of obligation, the obligation an employer is to pay you, not to provide work. So by you staying at home, they're still, as long as they're paying you, effectively they are paying you because they're asking you to use a paid holiday.
Right.
I think if the government had had a better look at this, they may have tied.
So then can you refuse? So if you refuse to
It should be
want
unpaid.
to,
It should be unpaid.
Now, what I wanted to follow up with was, because of SSP, and I think this may be relevant for other people in the chat, is that my particular friend does not have recourse to public funds. So once you're in the zone where you don't have recourse to public funds, and let's say, for example, you had run out of your paid leave time, you've got no more left. Are you pretty much sort of just needing to accept that you have no money coming in, and that is that? Should you have to go home?
Yeah, that is that, because
wow.
SSP is public funds, and also the benefit system that kicks in is also public funds. However, universal tax credit is not deemed as a recourse to public funds.
Oh, I wasn't aware. Could you say that again? I didn't know that.
Universal tax credit is not deemed to be a recourse to public funds.
Really?
Universal tax credit, is that different to the regular tax credit that people are paid?
It's different, yeah. So it's for those who are earning less than a certain amount that will not qualify for benefit. So you have to be working, but you're not earning enough.
Right. So is this the 16,000 something threshold?
I'm not too sure about the threshold, but I don't think you would file.
Yeah, it sounds like yes.
Yeah. So she may get universal tax credit.
I see. Okay. That's really good to know. So has anyone else got questions before we move on to the next item?
I just wanted to go over what was said before. You know, if your employer says, go home because your colleague has COVID, but obviously they want you to use your leave, and you say, no, I don't want to, can you stay at work, or what will happen? Can you repeat that? Because obviously you don't want to use up your leave, so you're refusing, so you not want to go home, you want to continue working. What do you do?
That's, although we say that employer is perfectly within the right to say use your holiday, because by law the employer determines when you can use your holiday, so they're using that right. It's quite possible that someone will soon test that and say, I'm not sick. There's no law that says I should self-isolate. And then insist on going to work. But as the law stands right now, it is that the employer can insist that you stay at home and use your paid holiday. If you don't want to use your paid holiday, it will be unpaid. That is how the law is being interpreted right now, but I'm sure someone will test it. But I won't want you to be the first person to test it. because you may lose.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Honestly.
Yeah, my
I
details
think-
are the next slide. So
Yeah, can we leave that on?
that's a website and our email address. So if I could be of any further assistance, just give us a call or send me an email.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
Okay,
you very much.
yeah,
Thank you
Seyi,
so much.
thank
Really helpful. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really, thank you so much for coming on this platform. We appreciate your time and all that. Everyone here, it's been very empowering, very informative. I'm sure for myself, and I'm sure we can all say that. And we hope that you will still come back when we invite you and all that. We really grateful. I don't know if anyone wants to say one or two things. David, if you have anything to say.
Yes, I think I'm still going to contact him privately, because I'm writing an assessment on HR and recruitment issues, which I need to submit any moment from now. So I might need some information. So yeah, I'll definitely get in touch, sir. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, then. So if
Thanks
there's
for
no
having
other question for Seyi, we're sharing is the slides and your contact details will go on our Facebook page and on our social media pages and all that. So it will be widely seen, apart from sharing it with everyone on this platform today. So Seyi, thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
see
Take
you
care.
again soon. Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.